Thank you.
All right. So usually John's the one interviewing other folks, very famous cartoonists, and
You're a famous cartoonist.
some in Sweden, France, like,
You're famous worldwide. So.
that's nice of you to say. But so I'm going to turn the tables on you a little bit today, and we're going to talk about the origin of Dummy. And
A story you well know.
I do, but I just wanted to kind of tell it quickly because we like to ramble as toddlers. And so I thought that we could just kind of power through it, and then we could sidebar and do unusual stuff. Just so everybody's familiar, like John's really good friends with Gary Panter, the great Gary Panter, Charles Burns, who's on the screen right now.
Friends of yours as well.
Yes. Mark Newgard, who worked at Topps. Is that the Topps cards or the
Bubblegum.
Topps bubblegum cards? So famously, so that's where this. I'm just trying to set up the story a little bit. So, and I'm going to look at my phone since this is totally socially acceptable not to look in your phone and have nothing. So I'm going to try to paint this picture as quickly as I can, and just so that we can, get into it. But please interrupt me at any point, John.
I'm sure I will.
And yeah, that's right. And so, the thing I was thinking about with Pee Wee is like when I got to know Gary, he would tell all stories, and he would call Pee Wee Paul Rubens. And, just there was always like an interesting street cred that Gary had, whether he liked it or not sometimes, that he worked with Paul.
I think Gary was proud of the work, and it's an interesting thing because I did a long interview with Gary on the Comics Journal many years ago. It was like 100 pages, like 80 pages of print, and then like it's a gigantic. I think it's issuing 2 of it. And when we were talking, I'd go over to his studio and talk to him for the interview. I went over many times. And part of it is, of course, we're talking about for the Pee Wee stuff. And he would always be sure to include the other people who worked on it.
Rick Heitzman
and Wayne White especially, but there were many other great artists who worked.
He did. This is true about Gary. Gary would always bring up those other names. He would always talk about how it was but he was one of the few people that didn't abandon. Paul was kind of a difficult guy to work for when I've heard, despite the documentary, which is wonderful, but just always a taskmaster.
Yeah,
I've heard.
A lot of geniuses are very difficult people.
But Gary was okay with sometimes that was his most famous role, like an actor. Like I've accepted that I'm this Indiana Jones or whoever. Like I'm always going to be Indiana Jones or something. So Gary was always okay with that. But for example, like my aunt, who was a great Pee Wee fan, who saw the show in L.A. When she was a student. When I told her I was working with Gary on a project, she was super excited. I got him to draw something for her, but he would make that effort to always be cool with people who are cool with Pee Wee, right?
Yeah.
There was a street cred about that, so I'm just trying to set this up. Like we're in this place, the Heinz History Museum, and there's a great presence of Fred Rogers here. And I sort of wanted to make a little bit of a correlation, respectfully, between the Playhouse and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and just the sort of TV reach of that, and just that the idea that Pee Wee was such a an important thing. Some people grew up with it, but also people who came to it later, like, what was your sense of Gary and other people who worked, like, because we're going to get to Kaz and Mark Newgard and other people, but, what was the sense of being around that show for the hardest thing you've done?
I think they had a lot of fun working on it. They were given complete creative freedom. I think the thing about I think I wrote something about this in the first issue of Doctor, is I said perhaps Paul Rubin's like greatest example of his genius is that he surrounded himself by really talented people and he let them do their work, right? There was certainly creative control that he had the final word on stuff, but he knew how to bring in the right people to get his vision across. And, Gary, I think at a certain point got sick of drawing that character and, doesn't want that probably to be his legacy, but he certainly doesn't deny it or get mad if he should have. When I started that issue after Paul Rabens died, right?
That's right. That's how, so part of this origin story of how this came up was Paul had died, and then I think he went to Mark Newgarden's class at SVA, and I'm sure you guys were talking about it, but then Mark Newgarden worked for Topps Bubblegum,
which created the trading card series.
There was trading cards, and there was all kind of Pee-wee memorabilia,
toys, and all kinds of stuff.
But there was, what would you call it, like a style book, sort of. There was this giant sheaf of papers.
It was like, I didn't bring it, but I have it at home. It's right next to my desk still. It's a very thick Xeroxes of the original art of Gary's sketches and other people's sketches and drawings and stuff. And some of it is the original art that made it into the actual published materials. Some of it isn't. And it's just like their style guides on how to, color and how
the drawing on the screen is one.
Right. Well, that's exactly it. Right. So that's a breakdown of how Pee-wee should appear in any printed.
So like the air freshener company called, they could just use that.
They would, and Gary was in charge of all the aesthetic, approval. After there were certain things that Paul Rubens did not want to do or whatever. So collaboratively, they worked on coming up with good things, what things should look like.
Okay, so there's this giant stack of. So you come to my house. John and I would try to have lunch.
I think I brought it over.
Yeah. So you brought over this big sheet of papers, and you were telling me what it was. But as you were telling me, I said, give it.
Yeah.
And I have a full-size Xerox machine.
You made a copy for yourself.
And it took like an hour. You can't just like put it on the top feeder and write it.
Yeah, you ran them up.
But all I wanted to do was like, oh my God, make a copy for myself.
Right.
And so he's telling me, well, I was in New York and I went to Mark's class. And
that was Mark's copy. So Mark he copies, yes, and he gave me one of his.
Okay. And so this is how I remember it. The timeline might be a little bit different. But then you went to Mark's class that was about zines, and you were showing some of your old zines, and you actually asked me for some I collect stuff just to show to his students, and this is just how I remember it, and you had mocked up a cover. Yeah, that was after the week.
I think since I gave that class a couple of times. That's right. The first time
but just cut to the chase about you made the cover.
I had a PowerPoint ready to go to give this class this talk about how cool it is when they age, right? And I was running through the PowerPoint, and I was looking at it, and I just said, "I'm such a hypocrite." I'm like.
You made a zine, but it was 30 years ago.
Right, it's like I haven't made a zine in 30 years, and I'm telling everybody how cool it is. Go out and make your own zine. And I hadn't done it myself, and so I felt like an idiot. And so I bought a dummy copy of the zine if I was going to do for it, and it was the Pee Wee Herman thing because I had all the materials.
So okay, but then that's when you got the sheet of papers. Or the sheet of papers. You came over to my house. I was making a copy of it, and then from what I remember is that you sat on your laptop. And because for those of you who know how to do this, like you make a magazine, you can have signatures where it's just all art, and then you could have signatures where it's just all text, and then you can interleave them and just have a quick make-ready magazine. So
right.
I would call them make-readies, and we would call it a print dummy. Okay, but what
we were trying to use arcane terms.
But you were literally just making it on your laptop. You're like printing out. You already had some stuff. This is what I recall. And we made one copy.
Yeah.
Like it's going to roll up on the screen sooner or later.
This did probably. This is what we
Yeah,
made two copies actually. This is one, and you have the other one.
Right. So then then you took that and virtually showed it to Mark,
Something like that.
the Tops guy, and then I think Norman Hathaway had a look at it.
I kept on screwing around with it, trying to make it a little bit better.
But don't undersell your ability on the computer in design. John's a very good designer. John is a very good designer. He knows how to lay out a magazine in the pre-digital age and in the digital age.
It's because I'm old. And I've worked in publishing.
Wise.
I've worked in publishing since I was.
So we make the first one, but then to me it's done. It's like we have some stuff, and then John's like, no, I want to tweak it a little bit more. So he goes back. He comes back the next week with more pages. When you ask John to write 1,800 words, he comes back with 18,000. And so it's bigger, better, now. And so we make a new one, and that has the blue cover.
That's this one.
Yeah. So then I have one of those.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
I was just futzing with it, and I have a bunch of friends who are incredible. Thank you for saying I'm a graphic designer. I don't really see myself that way. I have some friends who are incredible graphic designers. Norman Hathaway is one of them. And I sent him some mock-ups of my stuff, and he said, all of it's great, he said, except for the cover.
Also, I'm a big fan of, I have a typewriter, and I like to just make typewriter. So we were using, I think John was using a typewriter font.
And blowing it out.
Just as a default, so we were making it super punk.
Correct.
And then Norman said, get rid of the
type,
and then Mark said, you can't just call it the art of Pee Wee's because that was
you don't want to get sued.
Well, that was the thing is that John didn't want to bum out his friends. So his friends, like if you make just a few to give out to your friends, then it's going to get back to Gary or Wayne or somebody, and they're going to be mad that we bootlegged.
It was more the estate of Paul Brewing's.
Okay.
Yeah.
But still, so anyway, so you have it as on the screen, it says The Art of Pee Wee's Playhouse, and Mark said, well, you got to call it something, call it John Kelly's Magazine or something, And so
he said, I don't care, it's got to have a name, you got to call it something, I don't care what to call it.
But you had been carrying around those ones that we made, and we're calling it what?
My dummy, right? This is the dummy of the zine that I would do if I was going to do a zine, but I'm not going to do a zine.
So now this is like the second week, or maybe the third week. So
it happened very fast.
So, but we're making it all on the copier. So he's coming over with new printouts, new text, new whatever. I'm still making it on the copier. And then you knew about this stuff, but I don't think you knew how advanced print on demand had become in the last few.
I didn't have to know because I wasn't taking it. Right. But
You knew it existed. But,
sure.
But then I didn't. My machine could run off 25 or whatever. But you already had 100 friends practically who would say they wanted it.
There were like 3 people.
He's being modest. But like there was enough people that were like, I want one, I want one, I want one. And so he printed 100
And very reluctantly printed 100, thinking that there were 10 years from now, there would be 97 of them. It's still a days.
And then what next?
And then I had them.
You put it on your...
And I like the way that they looked, so I just posted
I do social.
on Facebook. I just posted a photo. I said, I made these. If anybody wants one, I just, DM me or like whatever, send me an email. And in like 2 hours, they all disappeared. Right.
So
then I went, oh.
I think many of you in this room know how hard it is to sell 100 of your self-published magazines. So that was great. And then you did what?
Well, I made enough. I sold them. So I made enough money to. I said, well, I'm going to print 300 more, and then those will not sell, and those sold in a day. Right. So then I was just like, what is going on?
So in my...
And I printed a lot more after that.
Right. So in my world, that's a hit. I'm happy.
It sells every day. I mean, it's
No. Okay,
but the post office
but this
every
was
day.
before the Pee Wee documentary came out. So he had these waves. Like
that was a whole other.
There was like Paul had died, and then there was this kind of like, oh, it's Pee Wee, but then it's also Gary Panther, it's also Payne Weiss, it's also Kaz,
Charles Burns, and
Charles, but also Kaz now more famous for Split Up than anything. But okay, so you do that, and that's exciting, and then the documentary comes out, and then it's like a whole other sellout.
Okay, yeah, no, there's been a number of spikes and peaks, and that's great.
But stay with me. So now you're doing like this underground thing. You know these underground people, and then Sherry Flanagan and other people so the way you segue into issue 2 that's on the screen now is a really interesting thing for me, because you could just keep doing Pee Wee issues.
So
right. But like that's not John. John's taste is and curation and skill is to be able to like take this new readership that might just be interested in Pee Wee and then show them this stuff that they might not know anything about. So do you want to talk about the second issue?
The second issue was like, I was like, okay, now, so after the first issue, I was like, Jesus, well, like, what do I do now, right? If I'm going to do a second issue, what do I do? And I had a number of ideas, if you remember. Some of them were bad ideas, and that's okay. I mean, I have a lot of ideas. I mean, some are good and some are not. But what happened was, the intellectual property rights for Mickey Mouse, for Steamboat Willie, right, expired, and it became public domain property, right? And I was kind of going out of my mind reading all of this online posting, like incorrect stuff. Just for background, I worked for a long time, for years, at Columbia University School of Law. So I had friends and colleagues who were intellectual property professors, and they taught the air pirates case.
So for the people in the audience that don't know what that is, just going to relate trace.
Okay, so the air pirates were a group of very talented young underground cartoonists who, in 1971, printed these very exacting parody comic books of Mickey Mouse that got them into an awful lot of trouble. Took up 10 years of their lives. The court, the case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and it was an insane story in many, many ways. I also was fascinated by the story, had written about it before, but initially it was just like, I was thinking, and I've been writing comics journalist since 1990, right? So I thought, I think I'm going to write a piece. This is even before I thought of doing the issue. I was just like, there should be a piece explaining exactly what's okay to do and what's not okay to do when it comes to intellectual property of characters like that, right? And most of it is, it's not okay, right? You're going to get into a lot of trouble, especially if it's Mickey Mouse and Walt Disney. Right? And then I was just like, well, I could do, I've written about the Air Pirates before a little bit, but I could do a full blowout on the entire story of the Air Pirates, because I knew all of the, I was very close with a couple of the members. One of them married my wife and I knew all of them from, writing about different things over the years. And so that was the initial idea, was to use, I guess, the timing of the Mickey Mouse public domain stuff to look at the Air Pirates story, because it's just like, there was all of these postings of these, some of them not very good at all, like Mickey Mouse parody things on.
You want to explain to people what that is?
Okay, so that is Wallace Wood did a so the issue has a lot more than just the Air Pirates. It goes through sort of a historical look at a lot of the more famous or not so famous cases of Mickey Mouse parody over the years done in the comic form, right? That thing that we were looking at there a minute ago was a incredible illustration by Wally Wood that ran in the Realist in 1968, right after Walt Disney died, and it's called the Disneyland Memorial Orgy. And it's probably the most bootlegged image of the counterculture. It was ripped off countless times, and it was sold at head shops. And that particular one was a black and white version, which is the one that I grew up seeing in like older friends, older brothers' bedrooms and stuff like that. And throughout the years. But there was other things. There was Mickey Rad. There was Mad Magazine did Mickey Wrote It. There were Tijuana Bibles, and all of that stuff is in that issue, because I didn't want to just look at the Air Pirates, because as interesting as that was, I wanted to ground it in context, right? So the first issue, the first printing of the first issue was 36 pages, right? This second issue ended up being 92 pages, and it could have been 700 pages, right? Because there's endless amounts of examples, and that's...
But what's nice about, as your fan and as readers, I just see a through line there between the overground, underground, parody, because Huey's kind of a parody, but it's very sincere. And same with the Air Pirates, you could say, because that something happens that transcends the original parody, and it reaches the broader audience. There's something there to that.
Well, when you have incredibly skilled artists doing the work, parody becomes its own thing, right? It's not just like you're doing just making fun of something, right? It turns into something different.
Do you want to talk about just even on social media, how the posting of an image like that just goes bonkers?
Oh, yeah, that's a weird thing.
Just the 20.
So I post a lot of things on Instagram every day, right? I recently posted an image, an Air Pirates image, which I've done many times, dozens of times before. There's one particular posting that I did maybe 3 weeks ago that now is like 1.5 million views, which I don't even know how to count what is a lot in this digital world, but that seems like a lot to me. I mean, I have a lot of posts that get 10,000 or 50,000, but millions.
Right, but if I may, but this folds back into then it's this different kind of advertising for your magazine, and then sometimes you'll see, these spikes in sales simply because of something that catches the algorithm
randomly captured,
which is what we all want to do sometimes as our own little entrepreneurial presence or whatever. But what's interesting when I see John doing is that because he's he grew up with print media, and so trying to for you to make sense of it for yourself, like you're doing right now, is just it's kind of fun for me to watch because you have a different attitude towards like sell your magazine type of thing. And I just appreciate it because it somehow actually reaches a broader audience with things that they want to engage with, And so, I mean, but like it seems so conscious when you were making those two issues, but now it really seems like a really great through line between those two issues,
I think that what I think, there's a whole, you want to like tread the line of not being ask, like, you don't want to like be throttling people, say, buy my stuff, right? So I'm just, well, lots of people don't have a problem with that, right? But I do though. But I want to post things that I find interesting, and which is the only thing that Dummy is. It's people ask me like, what do you cover? You cover the underground. It's like I'm like whatever I think is cool, whatever I find interesting. That's what it's going to be about. And also whatever I don't really understand, right? Because the only way that I lately can understand something is to write about it. And writing about something for me, as you said, it goes on 18,000 words or whatever, but it means talking to all the people that I can and doing a lot of research and doing a lot of free writing.
So some of the things that were coming up on the screen that you guys might have seen is who remembers OK Soda? Like, Anyway, so that'll be in the next issue. You want to talk a little bit about OK Soda before we go to questions?
OK Soda was like some bizarre thing that Coca-Cola did in 1992 and 93, using our very depressing, dark artwork by people I know, friends of ours, Charles Burns and Dan Clowes and a couple of other people. And it was a total disaster, and it didn't work. It was only in a few select markets. It was trying to reach that hard to reach Gen X audience, and so they thought making a depressing, terribly tasting soda would be the way to,
Just right after Zila had debuted, done something clear, Sprite-like,
right. But it wasn't in my market, right? I grew up in New York, and
it was in California. It was in Pittsburgh. Yeah, that's right.
It may have been in all those places. It wasn't in New York, and there was no internet.
So what happened again? You got the style book essentially again.
I did, yeah.
Was it Charles that had it?
No, a friend. A friend sent it to me, and
it was like a folder that had a bunch of.
It was a media kit with all of this. More than a press release, it was the kit not dissimilar to the Pee Wee style kit. So it was like a breakdown of like how all the images, just the branded style kit. This is how it should be presented and everything. And it was written in this tongue-in-cheek, way that the whole campaign was. But I didn't know it was only years and years after OK Soda failed that I heard anything about it, because there was no internet in 1992, 93 when it.
Oh, that's right. You did. That's right.
I had no idea. When people, I knew the guys who did the artwork, but it was just a commercial job for them, right? And when people started talking about it, I'm like, well, okay, but what are you talking about? And they're like, oh, it was a soda with depressing art done, trying to get slackers to buy it soda. And I go, there's no way that happened. There's no, because I had worked professionally in marketing, right? At famous places, right? Places as famous as Coca-Cola, right? And I was like, there's no way that somebody could have lighted that. There's no way that anybody would let that go. You're just bullshitting. There's no way that actually was a thing. And it turns out it was. So I have a thing in the next issue where I talk to Dan Clowes and Charles Burns about it, and also people from Coca-Cola and and everything. And it's still like, you know, like a bizarre thing, but I'm not making fun of it. I'm just trying to understand like how it happened. And then also from their point of view as the artists, what it was like to do something so stupid.
Sure. Do you want to just bring it back to like making the magazine one last time, and then we'll go to questions? But you know, because sometimes people come up to you and they say like, "How did you get this magazine?" You know, like how did this? You know, like it as if you got this job or something.
Yeah, right. So I've been writing for the Comics Journal since 1990.
For those who don't know, the Comics Journal is like the New York Times of comics, fancy, vaguely Anderson.
It's
Well respected.
At least at that time when I first started working, and I think today still it was kind of the place that really gave a hard look at the comics industry and
But can we sidebar into like so John did write for the print journal, but then in the last 20 years the print journal has sort of
the internet
happened, but also the print journal would come out once a year, and sometimes would be this, you know, curated thing that was, you know, wasn't just pitching an art to them.
Right.
So then about 12 years ago you started writing for the online journal, and you folks in the audience might recall, it's like there was a time when somebody would post a 2,000 or 3,000 word essay, and there would be a lively discussion underneath the comments, you know, the golden age of blogging.
Right.
And then that ended completely.
Yeah.
And people, there'd never be a comment. People would just kind of say something about it on another social media platform. And then John would write these
long pieces
that he would say to me, I don't even know if anybody ever read it.
But I would also say, I don't know if I would read it myself because it's too long.
Right, because you can scroll
on the platform.
Right. So one of the things about, for me, I got my Xerox machine during the pandemic, and I just thought, yeah, the world's ending. I'm going to buy this $600 Xerox machine. Costs $300 to get it delivered. And so, but so then anyway, like I was just all about print. I mean, I always was, but I doubled down on the print, and then I forbade any of my subscribers to put it online. You couldn't take a picture of it once you got it and put it online. If you didn't, good heavens. And anyway, John would write these amazing things, and I would look at them, but then we would have a discussion like, is anybody reading this? And so I would harangue you pleasantly.
I would say pleasantly.
Bully him. And I would say, like, don't give it away. You know, they're going to pay you something, but like, just like, and because it was this Pee-wee thing, because, you know, sometimes you can put things online and no one cares. You put as many images as you want. But I think because it was this Pee-wee thing and you were concerned about the legality of it, but also you didn't want to give it away again, that this kind of collects. And I just think it's a really interesting moment, not just for you, but kind of like now there is this return of print. People are coming back to physical media. And just like as somebody that wrote for the journal, you know, in the old days, and then as it transitioned to a digital thing, and even now, like, how does that, you know, seem or feel to you from this other vantage?
I think there's a couple of things, and one of them, there's. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen some article really that's been posted online that I thought like, oh, that's a really good art direction. Like, you know, I like the way that they, you know, it's all so cookie cutter and standard, right? And you can only put a certain amount of images in an online thing, right? Because it's, I don't know what people have different reasons for posting things online. A lot of it is just visual, but you can't overload an article with too many images because they're doom scroll. Yeah, it's, you know, becomes a different thing. And I also am somebody who loves magazines and loves the printed form and books, and I wanted finally to go back to doing something that I thought looked good, right? You know, I've never seen something posted on an online magazine or website that I find like, oh, like outstanding. So and I also just at a certain point, it's what you're talking about. Like you don't know who's reading it or don't, the feedback is very little. And I just got sick of writing these long, complicated things. And I still write for the Comics Journal all the time, but I wanted to hold something. I wanted to have finished something and then hold it in my hands. And if I wanted to look at it again, I wanted to go onto the shelf and pull it off and look at it rather than, when did I write that? Let me find it, let me search it, and then, looking at it. I wanted to grab it. It's the reason why I multiple copies of many books, right? Because I can't find one of them sometimes, so I'll just buy them.
But I think this has just come along at this interesting moment in our culture who, for people like you and I who are, collect things and level magazines like you're saying, but the journal has changed. There's not that many great publications about things that we like in this arena that are very well written or very well designed. There's lots of stuff lots of stuff that goes up and down the chain of load up. But whatever I feel like you're doing, you were able to grab all of those things that you have experience with. And it's just, I can't over accentuate how much of a hit this is and how happy I am that this thing that you made on a copier and then kept pushing, because I would have been fine with it being the low culture thing.
Right.
And you went for it. And because Jones also has two masters in fiction writing and he participates in a different world than I do. And I just mean that in a respectful way. Like you have a different reach and you get a different respect sometimes. And so I think you really just touched a nerve, and I'm just watching you do it as your fan. It's just really exciting. And it's like, I always knew you not coming runs out of the park, but boy, like, isn't it exciting to see those 18,000 word essays that might have gotten, cut down by an editor or something, like you're going to polish that up and make that the way, what you want to do in your magazine. And that's just, super exciting. So like,
Well, thank you very much. And I just want to reiterate it that none of this would have happened in the Western Street Up.
That's very generous.
It's not generous. It's traits. I just wouldn't have gotten around to doing it, right? It wouldn't have happened.
Tell me for saying that, but that's why but it's this show that we're at right now, where a lot of people do make their own publications and stuff like that. That's sort of what I want to touch on, is that these things that you think might just be, you thought this was just going to be for your friends, for 5 people, 3 people, whatever, then turns into sort of like, sales are sales. It's like, you could say a career, but like this has really changed how you operate in the world. Like you're busy all the time doing this stuff.
Yeah, and it's great. And I'm doing exactly what I would dream that I could be doing. And it's happened at a perfect time. And I couldn't think of anything better that you're doing is just writing all day long, every day, about stuff I love to think about, to write about. And strangely, people want to read it. And at least maybe, I don't know if they read it or not. They want to look at the pictures, I think. So that's cool.
That goes a long way, yeah.
But that's part of the whole thing. It's curating the right.
And it's also what's cool about comics too, is that sometimes it's just, you like that artist, that you just, yeah. But,
Right.
But so
let's judging that, like, people for whatever reason they are interested.
So let's try to maybe get a few questions. There might be some Paul Rubens questions, might be some Eric Hanna questions, might be some Mickey Mouse questions.
Anything anyone wants to talk. I can talk more about the next issue.
Yeah, we can talk about whatever.
Whatever. I can
segue to issue 3.
Issue 3. Issue 3. The way I describe it is it's a mystery, and it's it's about mysteries, and not like Sherlock Holmes or stuff like that, but it's strange things that I personally, maybe others will find mysterious, right? Things that I don't understand. So some of them have some very famous, in my world at least, in the dummy world, people in it. People in the next issue will include Gary Panther, Charles Burns, and the Clowns, and Gene Woodring. Mark Beyer may be in it, maybe not. He might go to the issue number 4, still up in the air. But I'm much more excited that there's a couple of pieces in there that are about people that nobody knows anything about, who are bizarre, amazing artists. And that's what's exciting to me, is that it's even...
Do you want to give away the Rose of Grace to me?
So if anyone is familiar with, there was an artist named Eugene Teal who did one comic strip called Frog Sunday that ran in issue number 3 of Raw magazine, and nobody knows anything about this guy at all. Even my friend Bill Griffith, the cartoonist, exhibit the kid, once told me that when he was editing Arcane with Art Spiegelman, they hired a private detective to try to track down Eugene Teal, and were unsuccessful. I managed to find out quite a bit about Eugene Teal, and even Wednesday, I mean, I'm not going to say what it is, but I uncovered something truly that just leaves me sleepless for this story that will be unveiled in issue 3. There's another equally strange and amazing story that's going to be in there too, about a very obscure Tom's, again, artist who did some incredible monster-ish artwork in the 1960s that everyone has always attributed that art to either Wallace Wood or to Basil Overzet, and it's not. It's by somebody else that no one has ever heard of. And that story, it's a bizarre story. And that will be in there too. So, again, as I said before, is that...
What about I want to hear about the Jim Woodring head.
So Jim Woodring has been a friend for a long time. And that goes back to before he was doing comics. He was doing a zine called Jim, and we used to write each other and trade zines. In the zine, he had a page sometimes called Gymland Novelties, right? Which were these, it looked like 1950s to 60s, 70s comic book ad page, mysterious, practical jokes or items and stuff. And I was always fascinated by that stuff, and always assumed that it was fake, that it was just like a parody of novelty ads or something. But there were actual items that
Almost like a box, like you fold the paper,
So-
you could like a...
there was all kinds of different things. There was a bizarre thing called Voodoo, which probably was very dangerous for people to actually use. But Jim ended up at least loaning me all of the archival material for that stuff.
But he actually would make them.
He would actually make them
So it
himself.
wasn't a joke. You
No,
could send away.
nobody bought. I mean, a couple of people bought some of them, but hardly anybody ever bought any of them because they appeared to be joke items, but they weren't. They were actual items they made. So
One was like, I'm like give it away, but it was like a box that, like you folded the paper and it made.
no, it was an actual box that he made. It was like a visual thing that you looked into, and it had mirrors in it so that your eyeballs were looking at each other. It was called a movie, and it would cause distress if you actually get it. And your body is not built to actually look into your own eyes apparently. So he's still making them, but I have one. Yeah, I wouldn't advise looking into it, but it's interesting to think about, right? And so I talked to Jim, and like
Are you going to offer Looney and then?
no, I'm not, but I'm trying to convince Jim to actually start making them again, and he may make a couple. They're very complicated and hard to make, but and I think culturally for like $5 or something. So there were all of these original like handcrafted items that you used to sell for like nothing, that probably we put them on eBay or Heritage or something, they would sell for a lot of money. That anybody could have got for nothing. And here's in the I've got a bunch of, but that's another thing that will be there, because to me it was a mystery whether or not it was an actual company or whatever. And it's hard to tell with Jim sometimes, but it was a real thing. He had like his own novelty company that really barely sold anything.
Do you want to talk about like getting the scans for the like all those Mickey stuff? There's this story that John has that could be a novel or a documentary in itself, like getting the artwork from.
So let just I'll put it in context. Is that for Dummy, and so one of the things that I do is it's extremely important for me that all of the images that I put into Dummy are scanned from the original art at the highest possible resolution, or they're scanned from the actual source material. So it was a printed cover, or that is yeah. So that's the production art to make the cover, right? So I'm very interested in the process of printing, right? And one of the things about Dummy is looking at that. It just interests me.
But if somebody had this, he wouldn't accept their scan, or it wasn't, but.
Right, because it usually wouldn't be high enough resolution curve for the printing at the level that I want it printed at, right? So, like that image, if this means anything to anybody, but like you could find a version of that image on like a Heritage auction website, scanned in at 300 dpi, which most things on the internet are at 72 dpi, so people would think 300 is sufficient, but it's really not. This 600 dpi. Anyway, I had to bring. I had to, at least in my mind, find the actual original art, which had been traded over the years at various people. And Bobby London did the artwork for this, and I don't know why, but he sold it. And it had been sold a couple of times, and it was impossible to track down who actually owned it, but somehow I did. And then once I found out who owned it, trying to arrange getting a scan of it was very difficult to me. And but somehow it worked out, and I ended up at a whole, at least for a while, having that original artwork where I was able to bring it to an imaging center and scan it in. And
they were like, "Well, all right, great, we'll take it, or we're going to put it tonight." And he was like, "No, I need a big present for that."
That image is so that's an image that went all the way to the Supreme Court, right? So it's one of the most historical pieces of art in comics history, at least to me, at least, So I wasn't going to just drop it off right someplace and then I was like damage it or something. So they ended up letting me actually do the scale, which was pretty cool. It was a gigantic scanner, like about twice the size of this table. And it wasn't cheap, but it was worth it to me. To me, all the guy. the best. Well, I wanted like all of the images to look like the actual thing, so that like it was as if the art itself is sitting on the page. And I don't know if anybody else cares about that or not. Or to me, that's extremely important. It's to honor the art, right, and to make. And that's part of the whole design aesthetic dummy too, is to make the art historic, because that's important to the art. Really means a lot to me. So have a lot of time and thought into making sure that everything looks as good as possible, and choosing the right images to help tell the story.
It definitely shows. I mean, John's a great designer, and he has a lot of help, as he mentioned earlier. But it's so. The best part about for me reading this was I could stop. You know, you put a bookmark in there. I mean, you just stop, and it's not like you don't. When I read an online article, I just scrolling forever,
And then you forget it.
yeah, you might make a page or leave that page open, but so the next issue, you know, you're still, you know, like, you know, when do you think that
I'm hoping
next year?
No, I'm looking at the summer. We'll see that. I mean, because there's been a lot of new information that's come in on a couple of stories. So I think with this issue, I made a mistake of being overly ambitious or confident or whatever it was, and I offered a pre-order for that issue way too early. So there was people who ended up like waiting a year after they had paid for it in order to get it. And I'm not going to do that again. So I'm not going to offer the third issue until it's I'm happy with the way it looks, and it's going to take however long it takes. I'm not going to finish it until it's finished.
So it sounds like I imagine maybe sort of looking the line between obligation and curiosity. You know, and this response you receive for the work and everything, and I don't know how you are doing this, but like, it sounds like it's a surprise to you, all these people interested in your work. Do you find yourself striking a couple of bounds with that line, or is that line even exist to you, or how do you respond to like this response you receive? Does that sort of occupy your mind all the time, looking at your work, or just pick it up?
I don't really think about it. Like I'm just puzzled by it really more than anything else. I'm happy that people, you know, anyone who makes something wants people to see what they made, I guess. And although I don't think I really cared when we made that first issue, I made that first issue and I was happy that I had it, right? And then I was also one thing that we didn't. So I was like, I want to make another one and send it to Gary Cantor and to the other people who helped and just put it together. They were happy. Then that was good. It's amazing. I'm very happy that people are enjoying it. And I get these emails or texts or even run into people who are just like, I can't even explain to you how much this means to me that this exists. Which I find is somewhat strange, but what? It's just like that something was made, especially with the peeling one, right? Just like peeling is so important to me that somebody would put this much time into thinking about it, and getting these images together. It's just, people buy multiple copies of that and give it to friends who just hold on to them. And it's cool. It's really, really nice that you're making somebody happy. So I'm honored by that. As far as like, what am I going to focus on or work on? It's got to be something that I find really interesting and puzzling, and I want to figure out what it is, right? After the first issue, there were no end of people who were telling me, "Oh, you should do an issue on this," right? Because a lot of people love this, right? A lot of people love Pee-wee, right? They're like, a lot of people use so many, and I'd be like, well, okay, well, you should do an issue. You should make an unseen. Like, if that's what's interesting to you, then do that, right? That's not interesting to me. Not demeaning it in any way, but I'm always going to be working on something. You can even go back to everything that I've ever reached with Commons Journal, really. It's always had to be something that I don't think I ever got assigned it in 35 years. It was always something that I wanted to write about, right? So, but what a great place to be. And you're right, though, is that you get to write about whatever you're interested in. I don't know how many other people have that type of thing. And it's, it's pretty cool.
Anybody else? Pat.
Hey, Pat.
Well, you two dummies advise everything that's good about this city. And the fact that you two know each other and work like...
We know you, too.
Yeah. Well, and I also want to say that the title of your magazine, Dummy, is genius. And Frank, your book, Pittsburgh, is the ultimate read. And I still think about that book and what an emotional, wonderful read that was. Did I expect? Thanks, Dummy.
We'll take that comment.
Anybody else?
Who else?
No, what kind of pen do we use?
Jessup.
Me.
So with the first issue and the third issue, in some ways, it sounds like a bit of it kind of just fell on your lap in a way, but and I know a lot of work went into it. I'm not saying all did that. But with the second issue, it seemed like you had to do a lot more tracking things down on the outset. Like you knew air pilots more broadly, and probably knew even a lot of the particulars, but I would like to know a little bit more about what goes into that sort of research process, and then in terms of actually tracking people down, getting a hold of them, what does that look like? And on a very practical, what does that look like for you, tracking people down, conversing with them, and then eventually getting that into the print issue?
Yeah, I think it all depends on what it is that you're researching or writing about. I happen to, I've been writing about this stuff for a long time, so I know a lot of people. And for whatever reason, people tend to agree to talk to me. And so that's great. Other people, especially in this third issue, we're talking about two artists who one died in 1970 and the other died in 1980. Okay, so there's no way to talk to them, right? But they have relatives, finding who those relatives are, like where do they live, how do you try? It's a lot of work. I also have a couple of friends who very generously are amazing researchers who sometimes they'll say, look, I can't find anything about da-da-da-da-da. Can you work your magic? And that happens too, right? It's kind of like I was talking a little bit about this before, and I'm not comparing myself in any way at all to the Paul Rubens, right? But I think I am smart enough to surround myself by really smart, talented people, right? And I love collaborating with people, and I love working on projects with people. And there's some people who are great researchers, great designers, great color correction people, know more about me and lots of things. And I've welcomed their input. So, but part of it's, some of it comes down to luck, right? Some of it is just not giving up. Some of it is just the thing that happened on Wednesday is so utterly bizarre because it's something that not just me, but any number of other people would have Googled these terms. I must have done it 1,000 times and nothing ever popped up. And then on Wednesday, all of a sudden, like the Holy Grail was sitting there on my screen in front of me, right? And I just could not believe what I was looking at. And what happened was looking at the source of the URL, somehow an image got behind some places in institutions file. And then all of a sudden the image was on the screen for maybe a split second, or I don't know how long, maybe it's still up there. But I happened to be in the right place at the right time, saw it, recognized what it was, and then I was able to track down the person. It was a photo, and I was able to track down the person who took the photograph. And within hours, I was talking to the person on the phone, and he was giving me original artwork that I have been searching for 30 years. And it just popped up like that out of the blue. And how does that happen? I have no idea. I'm very grateful that it did it. Because it takes something that's interesting and mysterious and bizarre and weird, and you'll never figure this out, into a whole other level. And that's when that stuff happens. It's extremely exciting. And it keeps you going.
You do a meta issue about the process of, and then around that deleted scenes.
Is this an indication that we're done?
Yeah, that's where it is. It's 1 o'clock.
All right, Joe Boys. Joe Gilly.